Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with the second video in our ongoing series of learning experiences. Last time out, we looked at how containment relationships help structure your model in Oracle Policy Modeling. This time around, we're going to look at something called inferred containment relationships. And it's one of those sort of pieces of vocabulary that if you've never heard it before, makes you kind of challenge whether this is the right piece of software for you. But we're going to explain it in a couple of really simple examples, and you'll see that it actually is incredibly simple to understand. To begin with, we're going to share with you this project. As you can see, we have, as last time out, of course, we have the global concept, and we have, in this case, two entities. We have an entity called the purchased item, which has a containment relationship which is many to one. So global can contain many purchased items. And then we have another entity, also a child of global, which is called the promotional message, which has a one-to-one. So you can have only one promotional message. The basic idea behind this demonstration is to think of going into a store and doing some grocery shopping, and you have several purchased items. And when you look at the till receipt, maybe there's a promotional message at the bottom of the till receipt that says, "Thank you for shopping here, and next time round you can have 10% off a can of beans," or whatever it is. So that's the basic model that we have in mind. And let's now put it into practice using the debugger just to make sure that everything goes according to plan. Launch the debugger. Let's open it up in full screen so it's easier to see. And as I mentioned last time out, when we're doing this kind of work, it's probably easier to go to the Data tab, and we can see that we have instances of the purchased item and instances of the promotional message. And in both cases, we are able to add instances. So I can add an instance of the purchased item. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and add several. And I can also add a promotional message. If I try to add several, I get the message telling me that because I specified there was only one promotional message, well, I can't have more than one, which makes perfect sense. But herein lies our challenge. I don't want to have to create a promotional message. I actually want the promotional message to be added automatically to the till receipt. So let's get on with that and pick up a few tips along the way. Here is a more complete version of the project. So I've simply filled out the purchased item entity with a couple more attributes. I'm going to go and modify the text of the two relationships. So all instances of the purchased item I'm going to call the purchased items. And I can have many purchased items. I'm going to leave that as it is. And in my promotional message, I'm going to change that to the promotional message on the till receipt, which is a bit long, but I'm just trying to get the point across that you should change it to whatever makes functionally and in terms of business sense to you. And I'm going to have one instance of the message in this. So we're here to talk about inferred containment relationship. And in the short debugger demo you saw a moment ago, I was able to create both purchased items and promotional message. And the point is, I really don't want to do that. I want to be able to have a promotional message that basically appears as if by magic. It is added to the receipt without my intervention. So I'm going to go over to the Rules tab. And to keep things simple, I'm going to create a new Word document. We're going to do that in here. So this is going to be our inferred promotional message example. And I'll open that up now. So to infer a containment relationship requires us to use one of Oracle Intelligent Advisor's functions. So I'm now going to use the rule assistant to help me write what will appear to be a very strange rule to begin with. So the promotional message on the till receipt, and then I'll put in brackets free cheese on Thursdays. Now, I'm actually not going to go any further than that. I'm not even going to add a condition to it. I'm simply going to put it like this. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see it, and I'll validate it. the promotional message on the till receipt exists. Now, doesn't that sound really weird? But it is literally waving a magic wand and saying the promotional message exists. And the part in the parentheses, in the brackets, is actually the promotional message. Let's go and focus on how that works. First of all, the promotional message in brackets is actually this attribute. You'll recall from your previous training that when you create an entity, any entity has something called an identifying attribute. So what you're seeing there is actually the identifying attribute being defined. So this is the identifying attribute value. The promotional message on the till receipt, you'll recall, I'm sure, is actually the relationship text from the containment relationship. So what I've done is infer a containment relationship. I've brought into being one promotional message using this syntax. You'll also notice that my entity now is in italics. This is how you can tell whether an entity is something that you have to manually enter or whether it is inferred in a rule. I'll go into the debugger, and you'll notice that I'm able to create instances of the purchased items, but the promotional message is in italics again and is already there. The italic is the promotional message has already been instantiated, has already been created. And you'll notice that I'm not able to add or remove the message because it is inferred. This entity instance has been inferred. I will not be able to manually manage it in any way, shape, or form. And the message itself is called free cheese on Thursdays. Well, so far so good, but it really isn't very representative of the kind of thing that we want to implement in real life, because we have a promotional message which is appearing when we don't have any purchased items. Nonetheless, we have demonstrated that you use a rule to infer a containment relationship in this case. So that's what we call an inferred containment relationship. And the byproduct is that I cannot change the nature of the relationship. I cannot change the instance that was created because it's inferred. So we're going to go back and we're going to change the rule that creates this promotional message into something a little more realistic. And it also gives us the opportunity to show you how you would use one of these special rules to infer this containment relationship in a more professional way. So before we do that, just to let you know, on the purchased item entity, I've created a couple of other attributes, specifically the unit price and the quantity and the final price. So if you buy a quantity of 2 with a unit price of 5, the final price will be 10. So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the price of all of the items on the till receipt. So let's go ahead and open up our Word file again. So there's the rule that I was just talking about. We have the final price, which is the unit price times the purchased item quantity. Here we have our rule which infers the promotional message. So I'm going to add, this time around, of course, I'm going to add a condition, and I'm going to use a new attribute which we'll create, which is going to be the total value of the till receipt, and we'll say is greater than 25, whatever currency it is that we're using. I'm just using a number attribute for simplicity, and we'll say, okay, the total value of the till receipt equals, and I'll use instance sum, which is going to I'll use instance sum, which is going to sum all of the different till receipt items. And before I go any further, I'll use the rule assistant to help me out here, and I'll say, okay, I want to sum the purchased items. And when I'm summing the purchased item, do I want to sum it on the unit price, the quantity? Neither of those. I want to sum the final price. So for each till receipt line, I want to take the final price, and I want to use that to create the total value of the receipt. So I validated that, and let's close the Word document to keep it nice and tidy and go back to the debugger and reinitialize the debugger so we start again from scratch. So now we have the total value of the till receipt, which is a global attribute, so there can only be one total value of the till receipt for each receipt. We have 0 or more purchased items, and we potentially have a promotional message, but it's not currently displayed because, well, we haven't met the condition that we just said. So let's add a couple of items to our till receipt. The first item we'll say is beans. The unit price is 1.5 and the quantity is 2. So currently my till receipt has a total value of 3 currency units. You'll notice that the total value of the till receipt is currently marked as unknown. That's because the second purchase item, I haven't actually filled in any of the input attributes yet. So currently we don't actually know the final price or the unit price for the second item. So the total price is going to show unknown until I populate that. So I'll say that I also added some cat food. And cat food is much more expensive. It's 10 currency units, and I bought 3 of them. So I spent 30 currency units on the cat food, which means that back at global here, you can see that the total value of my till receipt is 33, which is the $3 for the beans and $30 for the cat food. And you'll notice also that the promotional message has appeared because I met the condition which I set on the rule, which you can see here, that said the total value of the till receipt has to be greater than 25. So the promotional message now only kicks in when the total value of the till receipt is greater than 25 currency units, which is my current case. So that's a much more realistic scenario, is that I have a condition which has to be met before I can infer my instance and create this inferred containment relationship. So let's take this example a little bit further, and we'll go back to our data tab. And we will make a change as far as the promotional message is concerned. Now I want the ability to infer multiple promotional messages. So I'm going to go ahead and change the containment relationship to say many. So now I can have many promotional messages, and I'm going to alter how my inferred instances are created. Previously we had the idea that there was a message if the value was greater than 25. For the time being, I'm going to put this into comment so that it essentially becomes invisible, and we'll look at a different way of doing this. I'm going to insert a rule table. Now, a rule table, typically, as I'm sure you already know, is used to come up with a value for a particular attribute where you have multiple potential outcomes. You might have an attribute called the price of the ticket, and the price of the ticket depends on how many adults, how many children. And you also have this unique feature in Word called the otherwise cell, where you can say kind of, well, if nothing else applies, this is the value which will apply. We're going to use a table to infer our promotional messages. So the table we need is actually slightly different. When you're using a table to infer instances and infer a containment relationship, you don't actually need the final part. So, and how you fill it out is slightly different. We're going to go into the rule assistant as we would normally, and we're going to, first of all, select the relationship. So that's another unique feature in this table. Instead of mentioning an attribute at this stage, this is actually the name of the relationship, the containment relationship. And we'll say here that the message will be 20% off cat, 20% off cat food on Thursdays. And the second message will be buy one, get one free on beans on Mondays. So now we have potentially 2 messages that might appear, and we're going to set conditions for each of those. And for this, for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to use a function that you probably know already, which is called exists. And I'm going to say if amongst the purchase items, and we'll say the purchase item equals cat food. And because I'm going to save a bit of time, I'll get this one out and I'll simply change it to beans. There we go. So I'll close the Word document and I'll switch on the debugger again, and I'll reset the debugger so we start again from scratch. Back at square one, I'm going to enter 2 purchased items as I did before. The first purchase item we'll say is cat food, and you'll notice that the debugger is smart enough to propose in a drop down either of those choices. So I'm going to say, yeah, this one is cat food, yeah. And I'm going to say the unit price is $10 again, and the cat food quantity is 3, just like before. And you'll notice that we have the 20% off cat food on Thursday's promotional message, which is now appearing. And the second item, I'm going to say the second item is actually, let's call it shoe polish. And the unit price is 3 units, and I only want 1. So I have 2 items on my list, but of course I only have 1 promotional message because neither of the items that I purchased are beans. I can go to my relationship and add another instance now. Let's say that this time round it is beans, and I'm going to buy 1 tin of beans at 1.5. And now you can see that I have the 2 messages. If I remove the cat food, I only have the beans message, and so on and so on. So this is a really rather interesting feature for inferring containment relationships. I was able to use a word table. And the uniqueness of this word table is I stripped away the otherwise, and I positioned in the conclusion section here, this is actually the name of the relationship. This is not an attribute name, this is the relationship name. And you can prove that to yourself just by clicking on it and choosing Go To, and it says, yeah, that's a relationship. So I'm inferring this containment relationship using this table. So this, in a way, is actually easier to understand as an inferred containment relationship. The promotional messages, which are contained in global, are inferred from this table. So that wraps it up for our second learner video in this series. I look forward to meeting you again for the third one coming up in a few days. Bye-bye.